right at the end there.
No, I'm interested in hearing what you've got.
Right at the end, whereas for Nephi the prophets ultimately speak to a community, for Abinadi they speak to the individual who desires salvation. What do you mean that Nephi speaks to a community while Abinadi is speaking to an individual?
So what I've got in mind, I mean, the details are in the book, and I worked through them at length, but Abinadi's interpretation of Isaiah and his sort of larger project and so forth seems to outline the kind of methodology we generally use as Latter-day Saints in reading Scripture. That is, I look for personal inspiration, individual inspiration about what I might do in my own peculiar circumstances, God's plan for me, etc. Nephi has a very different vision of things. When he reads Scripture, what he seems to see there and what he encourages his readers to find in Scripture is instead a focus on the whole history of Israel, the entire complex nature of the covenant, and what that implies about constructing communities and something much larger than one's individual concerns. And so I think we have these two radically distinct ways of reading Scripture in the Book of Mormon. And so, yeah, community is clearly the focus in Nephi, whereas, yeah, individual, private, almost devotional focus seems to be what Abinadi has.
In the church today, does our focus seem to be more of an Abinadi focus or more of a Nephi type focus?
Unquestionably Abinadi, right? I discussed this in the epilogue to the book. That,
yeah.
I mean, we tend as a people to read like Abinadi, and as I say, I mean, obviously this is, at least for a believing Latter-day Saints, right, the Book of Mormon models this as a prophetic way of reading Scripture, so I don't mean at all to disparage it. What I do in the book is try to point to the possibility of the other form of interpretation and to work out the relation between these two a bit. But yeah, I do think we tend to read Scripture the way Abinadi does, and I worry about what may be missed if we exclusively read Scripture the way Abinadi does.
So with all of this that we've been talking about, I want to go all the way to the very beginning of your book. The first couple sentences of the preface. And you say, put simply, this book is about how the Book of Mormon teaches us to read the Book of Mormon. Such simplicity, though, is a bit misleading because my aim here is to see, in full recognition of its complexity, how the Book of Mormon teaches us to read the Book of Mormon. So after everything we talk about, and I go right back to the beginning of your book, how does the Book of Mormon teach us to read itself?
Yeah, so my argument is that the Book of Mormon, this is what I work out in chapter 1 of the book, is that the Book of Mormon offers on occasion instances where we see someone in the Book of Mormon reading another text from the Book of Mormon. So we actually have the Book of Mormon reading itself as a kind of model for us. And what we find there is that we're supposed to read it typologically. Now, of course, what does that mean? And that's what I spent most of the book doing, is looking at these different typological models. So if typology is exhausted, if you will, in Abinadi's approach, then that's how we ought to read it. But if there's also this approach, this typological way of reading Scripture that we find in Nephi, where the task is to understand history in a certain way and to use Scripture to understand the covenantal history of Israel, etc., and our place in that, then that's what we ought to be doing in reading Scripture and in reading the Book of Mormon itself. We should be reading with an eye to how it transforms history and opens up possibilities, how it opens up ancient, overlooked things that should transform fundamentally the way that we experience the world, the way we experience history, the way we experience ourselves.
And I just want to reiterate again, as I kind of wrap up with this little segment here, that this book is excellent. For anyone out there that's listening, Joe is really scratching the surface with all of these ideas. And so this is only meant to whet your appetite, to go out and look at the book and really look at his arguments closer and see what you can get out of them. Joe, where's the best place for people to find this book?
Oh, Amazon's the easiest way to do it, yeah.
And also it's published by the Salt Press. And do you want to just throw in a little plug of what Salt Press?
Yeah, Salt Press is a relatively new outfit that's publishing academic and especially, say, theological work on Mormon Scripture. It's unique in that regard, and they have a few titles out and some more ones coming, and I think it's an exciting project.
Excellent. And so, as far as the future goes, what does the future have in store for Joe Spencer? And part B of that question, do you have any projects on the horizon that you would like to share with us, just very briefly?
Yeah, I mean, I can say a word about my next book. I'm working on this book called For Zion, A Mormon Theology of Hope, which you mentioned at the beginning. And that's the project I'm buried in right now. It's a study, the first half of it is a study of the theme of hope in the writings of Paul the Apostle, specifically in the Epistle to the Romans. And then the second half takes that notion of hope and looks at it in the Doctrine and Covenants, and specifically the law of consecration. What's at stake there? How do we interpret it? And I mean, if I were to put it in a nutshell, the book is a kind of study of an allusion in D&C 42 to a certain theme in Paul's writings and what that may spell out about the relationship between Paul's theology of hope and the modern revelations concerning living the law of consecration, living as a Zion community.
Excellent. Well, Joe, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Of course.
And good luck on all your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please visit us again at www.themormonbookreview.com.